I used to think anxiety was the enemy, but after 2 years of living with it and 3 years now of helping other people overcome it, I now see that anxiety isn't the enemy. It is nothing more than just feedback. In this video today, I'm going to show you how you can decode this feedback so that you can begin to take control over your anxiety and your life. Now, you know when you touch a hot surface, how you get that pain as feedback to remove your hand because obviously it's causing damage and we don't like it. So we get feedback in the form of physical pain and a burning sensation to tell you, hey, get your hand off this thing, it hurts. Anxiety works in the same way. It is feedback, our brain telling us, hey, I don't like this thought pattern. I don't like what we're thinking about. This reminds me of something painful. And it's just feedback of, this is just an area in our brain where we have a little bit of work to do to balance out our mindset so that it no longer is hurting us. Once you realize this, you realize that anxiety isn't a bad thing. It's here to help and to guide us to having a more balanced and objective mind in life. Now, before we dive into all the meat and potatoes of things, please give the channel a like, a subscribe, and if you haven't yet watched the video How to Overcome Anxiety, I suggest you pause this, dive over there, give that one a watch first, and then come back. That video gives you all the tools so that you're better equipped to handle anxiety when it comes up. Then, once you've got those tools in your tool belt, come back to this video and we'll start looking at why it's occurring and how we can start removing anxiety from your life. Now, the first two questions we should ask. What is anxiety and why does it occur? So the symptoms that we label as anxiety are genetically coded survival mechanisms that our ancestors used so they could survive and thrive when they lived out on the plains. Let me say that in a more simple way. The symptoms, elevated heart rate, shortness of breath, adrenaline, feeling like your stomach drop, these are all things that our body did to help our ancestors survive. The reason our heart rate elevates is so that the heart can pump more blood to the muscles, they're ready to run, to fight, to do whatever they need. Adrenaline comes into the body, that's giving us that extra fuel, that extra energy to get away from the threat, to fight off the lion, to wrestle the lion, if that's what we need to do. The reason it feels like our stomach drops is because our body shifts from parasympathetic nervous system to the sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic is rest and digest. Sympathetic is survival, it's fight or flight. When we're in the parasympathetic, a lot of the blood is going to our stomach to process all the food. But as soon as danger arises, all that blood rushes from the stomach out into the muscles so that we can fight, so we can flee, so that we can wrestle the lion if we have to. This is just one important piece of the puzzle of understanding anxiety so that we can begin to remove it from our lives and take away the control it has. Now, another important distinction about our minds. Evolution has hardwired us to favor false positives over false negatives. A false positive is me thinking I hear a sound, imagining, oh, there must be a lion there, and being wrong. There not being a lion, but me thinking there is. A false negative is me hearing a sound, thinking, it couldn't be a lion. Turns out there is a lion there, and ending up as lunch. Thanks to evolution, we have evolved to be wired for false positives. Our brain would rather be wrong than be dead. This still applies in our everyday life. Our brain will see something and think, oh, that could be dangerous. Let's trigger the fight or flight response because it would rather trigger it and be ready for it than the alternative. That is why some people just jump at shadows because their brain is still stuck in that survival instinct of false positive, and then left, right, and center, things are triggering their anxiety because they're living in that sympathetic nervous system as well. Quick overview of what we've discussed so far. Anxiety is the term used to describe the cluster of symptoms that our ancestors used to survive when they faced danger out on the plains. Our brains are wired for false positives. It will jump at shadows. It would rather be wrong than be dead. So now the next question becomes, why does this trigger go off when I'm not in any physical danger? And to answer this, we first need to have a look at how our thoughts are what shapes and controls our reality. Now, if you watched one of my old videos, you would have heard this example before. Imagine I go for Australia, you go for England, and there's a Soccer World Cup final. If Australia wins, I would be happy. I'd be crying tears of joy. You, who goes for England, would be sad. You'd be crying tears of pain. The one result, but depending on how we perceived it based off our values, determines how we feel. It wasn't the event that told us how to feel because it's not the same feeling for both of us. It's different. So it's how we perceive that event that determined how we felt. It is not what happens, but our perceptions that control our reality. Imagine you're walking through a dimly lit room and then out of the corner of your eye, you see something coiled up in the corner on the floor. Barely a moment would go between you noticing this thing and the fight or flight response kicking into your body as you think, oh my God, there's a snake here, I'm in danger. You jump across the room, your heart starts pounding, you feel the adrenaline, you flick on the light, you turn back ready to face the danger, you're holding a stick or something to fight it off, only to realize, oh, it wasn't a snake, it's a coiled rope in the corner. Now, clearly the snake didn't cause your reaction because there was never a snake to begin with, so we can't blame the snake. It was your perceptions of the environment that determined how you felt and that caused your fight or flight response to kick in. Your body was reacting to your thoughts. This story confirms two things. One, our brain, once again, is wired for the false positives. It would rather see something, think it's dangerous, and be prepared than the alternative and get caught with its pants around its ankles. Number two, our thoughts and perceptions control how we feel. This is why not everyone has the same fears. This is why you might have a fear of dogs, I might love dogs. If we're sitting side by side here and a little dog walks into the room, I'd be ecstatic, I'd want to go play with it. Whereas you might freeze up, you'd feel your heart rate pumping, you'd feel like you're in danger. The dog's not causing that fear, because if the dog was causing it, we'd both feel the same way. It is each individual person's perceptions of the dog that determines how they feel. So the question becomes, why is one person perceiving danger while the other is happy? The answer is that it's because we're not born with fears. There are no hardwired fears that everyone should have. Even something like death. You have ancient societies like the Spartans that longed for death and they wanted a good death in battle. Nowadays people are afraid of it, but it's not something that humans are conditioned to be afraid of. You might think that everyone's going to fear what you fear, but no, that's just you looking at the whole world through your lens, not recognizing that everyone is different. So our fears arrive from two things. Either we're taught them or we learn them through experience. Let's do another example. All right, let's imagine we've got a little girl. It's her 7.5 birthday. She doesn't have a pet dog, but she's played with dogs in the past and has enjoyed their company. But on this fateful day, she has a terrible experience with a dog where she's out and a vicious dog comes and attacks her. She gets super scared, it's barking at her, and then it bites her and causes pain. Now, obviously before this moment, the girl didn't have a fear of dogs. 2 weeks later, she's walking along the street with her mum. She sees a dog and all of a sudden she starts to feel fear, pain, and starts hiding behind her mum. All of a sudden, she's developed a fear of dogs. This response and this fear to dogs didn't just happen randomly. It's a brand new thing. We know that because she didn't used to have it. Then an incident happened, and then the next time she encounters a dog after that, she's feeling the fear. So obviously the fear started in that moment when there was an attack. If she never had that experience where she got attacked by a dog, she would have had no reason in her brain to be afraid of dogs. So she would have continued her life enjoying the company of dogs. But because that happened, because she's holding on to that trauma, then that's now playing out in her life. Every time she sees a dog, she's experiencing the fear. If I had the ability to wipe her memory and erase her memory of that dog attack, then she forgets the reason she's afraid of dogs. She goes back to not fearing dogs. All right, slightly esoteric concept here, but please just bear with me. The present moment acts as a mirror between the past and the future. Because that girl had been attacked by a dog in the past and she associated that experience with pain, the next time she sees a dog right now, she's mirroring that experience from the past, projecting it into the future, imagining, okay, I see a dog, it's going to cause that same experience of pain and all those sort of things. And so the body does what it's naturally meant to do, of responding to danger, responding to perceived danger with the symptoms that we label as anxiety. If she didn't have that painful experience in the past, then the present moment has nothing to warn her of. It has no experiences to warn her of, so she doesn't have anything to react to. The reason this happens is our brains have something called the amygdala. This was something that our ancestors, once again, used to help them survive on the plains. They lived in very cutthroat environments where there were so many things trying to kill them. They had to know which water was safe to drink, which foods they couldn't eat, which sounds meant that a wild boar was approaching and which was a lion. They had to have all that sort of stuff front of mind, but they couldn't keep that in their conscious brain because they would have just been overwhelmed with processing everything around them. So the subconscious brain would store memories and charged moments of near-death experiences so that it could warn them when they found themselves in similar events in the future. Present moment acting as the mirror. If in the past they went to swampy, murky water and tried to go for a swim and just escaped being eaten by a crocodile, then their brain is going to store that event and all the context around that experience in their brain so that next time they find themselves in a similar position, they could be on edge and prepared so that they don't end up becoming the crocodile's lunch. That is the role of the amygdala and how we used it to survive. The problem is the modern world has evolved and developed where we're no longer running away from animals. We no longer need that, but the brain hasn't changed. It's still doing the same processes, which is why it's important to understand what the brain is doing so we can understand why we're feeling these fears and these emotions so often so that we can overcome them. Okay, so that's why we've got an amygdala. Back to that little girl example. If I could go back in time and wipe her memory of that dog attack, then now all of a sudden she no longer has a reason to be afraid of dogs. She doesn't have any painful memory or anything like that to be projecting forward into the future. Now, obviously wiping memories is fantastical, but what we can do instead is we can help her to balance out her mind to that experience. Currently, she's perceiving all the pain, all the negatives, all the drawbacks that came from that experience. And because of that, it's stored in her mind as a terrible thing that she would hate to happen again. But using the power of our mind, we can help her to identify the other parts of that experience, the benefits, the opportunities, the advantages, the things, the good things that actually came and the hidden benefits in that experience. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, that's crazy. How is there any good in a dog attack? I'm going to use a personal example from my life so you can understand this concept, how it works, and how we can start transforming our life by finding the benefits and balancing out our mind. Just under a year ago, I came off my bike and broke my collarbone. At first, this was devastating. 1, it was incredibly painful. 2, I was trying to build a career as a yoga teacher. I'd been doing so much work on my body and it was just a massive setback. I knew that meant 3 months of no exercise. It felt like a massive career blow and it felt like, oh shit, I'm screwed. I'm gonna waste the next 3 months. Because I had all those thoughts and feelings around it at the start, I was a victim of it. My perception to the event was entirely negative. Had I held on to this belief, then I would have carried it forward, probably a fear of jumping on a bike again, because it's like, if I get on a bike again, I don't want to come off, break my collarbone, because only negative things come from that. But here's what I did. Broke my collarbone. I got home. I was a victim of it for about 20 minutes, and then I said, okay, that's enough. There is good in this. Let's identify the benefits, the opportunities, the good that has come from this. So I asked myself, what is the good from this? The good that came from it is I had been trying to build a life where I worked just purely for myself. I was balancing 2 jobs at the moment. That broken collarbone forced me to leave those jobs and to invest in myself to try and build the future that I wanted to do. Number 2, I kept putting off a trip to China because of work. Now all of a sudden, because I broke my collarbone, my work no longer existed. I pulled the trigger on that trip and that trip changed my life. Number 3, I realized, okay, shit, I rode home with a broken collarbone. I endured that pain. That helped me to become more resilient. That's something I can store in my mind to pull on next time I'm having a tough time, next time I'm enduring pain, maybe in a marathon, in an Ironman or something like that. Once I started to see that there were benefits and opportunities in this broken collarbone, it no longer became a bad thing. I stopped being a victim of it and I realized, okay, it had its drawbacks, but it also had its benefits. It's a perfect thing. If I go back in time, I wouldn't change a thing. That's how things were meant to play out. This is the power of balancing out your mind. Now, because of that, I have no fear of jumping on a bike because I'm not afraid of breaking a collarbone again, because that's not an entirely bad thing in my brain. Same deal, if we help that little girl go into her brain and find the benefits, you take it from being an entirely bad thing to balance it out a lot more. The brain's much less likely to have to worry and warn you about it again because you're no longer perceiving it as such a bad thing. All right, bringing everything home. If we perceive something to have more pain, drawbacks, negatives, and challenges associated with it, then our brain is going to fear its reoccurrence. When we feel like we're in an environment that matches that, our brain is going to trigger our warning through the anxiety symptoms saying, hey, we don't want this to occur, let's get ready for fight or flight. The brain can't differentiate between a lion attack and something that we fear in general. As far as the brain's concerned, anything that we perceive as negative is a life-threatening thing. That's why it will confuse something like talking in public or someone questioning our beliefs or opinion with a dangerous environment and trigger the anxiety reaction because of that. So anything negatively perceived in the past gets mirrored forward as dangerous, regardless of whether it's a lion sneaking into your tent or someone questioning your beliefs. That's why it is important to go back into your mind and to balance out your past perceptions, because as long as those negative perceptions are sitting there, they're sitting there as triggers, and anything we see in our current environment that matches and reflects that means that we're going to mirror that past moment into the future, and boom, there comes the symptoms and the reaction. The body's just doing what it's meant to be doing. The mind's doing what it's meant to be doing. But living in this 21st century, it is so easy for us to negatively associate with so many different things. People are so much more polarized now. Having a narrative and running the story of what happened to you and being a victim of that is the norm nowadays. But the problem with that is it means we're storing things as more negative, which means that we're creating our own anxieties because we don't want those things to happen again. We're getting rewarded with sympathy, but we're getting punished with anxiety. The key is balancing your perceptions to the past experiences. Next time you feel anxiety creeping in, first, recognize that it's feedback for something. Just as if I leave my arm here, it's not just going to snap in half. It needs something to happen to it for it to break. Anxiety doesn't just happen without a reason. Anxiety is a response to our thoughts and our environments. So next time you feel anxiety coming on, take a moment to recognize, what were my thoughts that triggered it? Once you recognize, okay, it came on because I was thinking about having to talk in front of a crowd, then you go back into your mind and think, okay, what negative experience am I holding on to of talking in front of a crowd that I perceive is all bad? Once you identify that experience, start asking yourself the balancing questions. What were the benefits that came from that moment? What were the opportunities, the advantages? How was that thing serving and benefiting you? Once you start listing out these benefits, you don't perceive it as such a bad thing anymore. Your brain no longer wants to warn you about it. The great news here is your brain is incredibly malleable. You can transform your mind. You can remove your fears by balancing out your perceptions. I will do a whole new video series on this balancing your mind on all different emotions in the future. But for now, all you need to know is that if you're perceiving something with more negatives, drawbacks, and pains than positives, advantages, and benefits, your brain's going to store it as a negative memory. That memory is going to get mirrored forward into the future. When you find yourself in a similar situation, it's going to trigger those symptoms we label as anxiety. By asking yourself the mental balancing questions, you can resolve the pain in the past, balance out that experience, remove the need for the brain to warn you, and collapse the fear. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, put them in the comments, reach out to me. Let's keep building, let's keep getting 1% better every day, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.